All right, guys, what's up? This is episode 2 officially of what we're calling the Hey Its Pickett podcast. This podcast is for artists and dancers who are looking to take that next step after studio, or maybe you've already graduated from studio and you're kind of stuck wanting to still dance, but you're not really sure what to do. Quality conversations that can hopefully help you and guide you along that journey when you decide to do that. Episode 2, we have an amazing guest named Sage Swenson. I've danced with Sage on multiple occasions, done multiple jobs with Sage. But we've never really had a lot of conversations about like dance in the industry and things like that. A few, but not a lot. So this is going to be great for me as well. So I'm going to let him kind of introduce himself a little bit and then we'll get going.
Alrighty. Hey, everyone. Sage, of course. I'm 22 years old. I'm from Salt Lake City. Grew up dancing in Utah, more so in the freestyle battle industry. Growing up, I was very self-taught. I joined Center Stage, a performing arts studio, when I was around 14. Started doing the Millennium Crew when I turned 16, joined Odyssey, just a professional company here in Utah when I was 17 until I was 19. Moved straight out to Los Angeles. Had a very, very lucky and successful early career is what I did. Immediately got a dance agency. I very quickly joined the dance union out there, SAG-AFTRA. Was working television shows. I've done backup dance work, company work out there, music videos, just even small random gigs for parties and everything. Even going so far as like shows in Vegas and random traveling gigs for random events. I've been teaching in and out frequently before Los Angeles, and now after Los Angeles, I just have been teaching a crap ton of movement quality, very specific based training, because I feel like that helps the artistic individuality and helps with confidence. And then, of course, hip hop and contemporary and a mixture of things. So that's where we are now, is just teaching. Hopefully getting back into more dance gigs and everything when the industry kind of comes back up from COVID.
Amazing. That was fantastic. Okay, so while listening, I want to start with Odyssey and what drove your decision to audition for Odyssey? What got you introduced to it? Because I think that, and it's like, I don't know, I guess it's not so much worth it now because it's ending, unfortunately, but
Yep.
It was such a great opportunity for dancers coming out of high school and not really sure what to do. But I know for a fact that behind Odyssey, there'll be something that pops up at a similar capacity. Totally. So I think it's still a great conversation to have. So what kind of like drove you to make that decision prior to moving to LA instead of just LA right off the rip?
More than anything, it was the lack of experience. I wanted to have something under my belt before I went out to Los Angeles. I wanted to have some sort of background, but also I didn't feel like I was quite ready to leave the community in Utah. I was super, super tight with the people at Millennium, and then just also the studios that I was growing up at and everything. And I just wasn't quite ready to leave. And Odyssey actually ended up being perfect because I went to Pioneer Performing Arts School, which is founded, of course, by Daryl Yeager, the owner of Odyssey. And he kind of recruited me from the high school straight into Odyssey. And I think the biggest interest that I took into Odyssey was obviously, one, performing professionally, having that professional title, and Odyssey has been a name in the dance community for, decades. And so going and seeing Thriller as a kid and everything and performing it as a zombie, it just seemed like the top tier of the companies in Utah. And so, of course, I wanted to have that under my belt as well and to have that on my resume. And so I just honestly was a really, really smooth transition. As you had said, straight from high school is a great opportunity. And Daryl had, of course, expressed great interest of me joining Odyssey. And it was really, really nice to have that even before going out to Los Angeles. Just the experience that it did give me as a professional company, even when it came down to rehearsals and kind of showing that professionalism really translated well into Los Angeles rehearsals and everything. Or if I performed early, or if I had a live performance in Los Angeles, I took those same skill sets that I had taken from Odyssey and applied it, and it was perfect. So I just more so wanted to have that professional experience, at least somewhat, before going out into the scene in LA.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and plus you get paid.
And plus you get paid.
I think that's like what I always used to tell people is like, despite all of the things, because unfortunately, maybe not unfortunately, but transparently, there is negative things in the Utah community surrounding Odyssey, and I think that just comes with the nature of anything related to anything. Like nothing's ever going to be a 100% positive experience. But the one thing that I would always tell people is like, it's such a great opportunity from the perspective of if you're 18 and you're not quite ready to go to LA, like it's a paying job, and it really was pretty decent pay for what it was, and for especially like if you are coming right out of studio and you're just like not really sure what to do, to be able to get paid enough to where you could live and be doing what you love to do is just an opportunity in its own.
Right.
So had you taken any trips out to LA prior to moving there? Like in studio or whatever the case may be, like whether it was to take classes or anything like that?
Yeah. So the great thing about the Millennium here in Salt Lake is they do a yearly Millennium experience is what it's called, where all the Millenniums around the world, if they choose to participate, and all group together for 1 week and they all train together, and we get a week of free classes and everything.
Right.
So I had done that twice.
Okay.
Where I went out and I also performed in Carnival, which was really interesting. Especially being under the age of 21, it's a very interesting experience.
Right.
But I made sure to go out there a number of times before I had moved out there, just so I could get some sort of groundwork of what classes I wanted to take, maybe what route I wanted to go down first. And then I also went out and auditioned for agencies and auditioned for different kinds of management out there, just to get my foot in the water. Maybe if I were to audition again, they would recognize me from the prior years.
Yeah, for sure. Because I feel like, because I took similar trips to LA when I was like, I was teaching, because I started teaching in high school, but and I feel like it was always a really good gauge of where I was at, because I feel like in like the Utah bubble, I always felt like, oh, I'm pretty good. And then I would go to LA, and like the thing is like what I think some people don't understand. I think it's more so obvious now, but like LA is like a culmination of all of those people from all over the world, right? It's like it's like the people that were the best in their town all coming to one place. So when you take a class there, at least my experience was like everybody's like baseline good. Like there really was like, you'll have your handful of like, I don't know if we want to call them like tourists, or like people that like the casual dancer that comes to LA and they're like, oh, I want to take an LA dance class. But the majority of the classes that I would find myself in were like baseline, everyone was good. So it's like, absolutely, it's like a very humbling experience.
No, it definitely is. And spot on with everyone in Los Angeles is like the best from their place.
Yeah.
It's very, very rare that you meet a dancer that's from Los Angeles, living in Los Angeles.
Ooh, yeah.
I think I have, I know only maybe like 4 or 5. My good friend Julian Chinchilla, he's actually on tour with Justin Bieber, and he's from Los Angeles, and I was shocked. I was like, wow, you're actually from Los Angeles. So because no one is, everyone, it's just a collective. And the summertime during like the high peaks when the tourists come in and everything, that's when every studio is jam packed and sold out classes. And that's when you get like, the people that are like just there for like, oh, I want to take a Los Angeles class.
Yeah.
Or when you get into the winter times and everything, that's when you see the actual community that's there in Los Angeles, and everyone there that is actually living there
Yeah.
is really damn good. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
it is very
100%.
intimidating, and it's a very humbling experience, especially when you get
Yeah.
into some of those classes with Sean Liu, Delaney, Casey, all those
Yeah.
people that are like, they're also younger than you,
Yes, but
yeah,
crazy.
it's very humbling.
And it's so much different in person too. That was the biggest thing that I like realized going to LA. And I think going to conventions too, because sometimes you catch some of those people on the convention circuit, especially like when I was growing up. And it's the same thing now, but with different people. But like when I was going to conventions was when like Sean and Casey and Jade were coming up in the convention circuit. So I remember seeing them like at Monsters and Pulse when they were super, super young.
Right.
But the one thing that I realized, it was actually in I'm gonna forget his name, but he was Chris Brown's choreographer for a while, and then he taught a class, and Jay Blaze was in the class, and I remember I had seen Jay Blaze online beforehand, and I was like, the ego dancer of me was like, he's dope, but like, like, all right, he's good. But I remember when I saw him in person and when I saw him like in the classroom environment, I was like, okay, I get it now. Like now it makes sense, because it was like everything looked easy. Like nothing was difficult in like when you watched him dance. And so I think that like that's also part of that experience of going to LA or putting yourself in environments with really good people, is you start to realize like that people are even better than you think they are over like your little tiny phone screen, right? Like it's totally different. Was there like any culture shock or any sort of like immediate experiences? I mean, you mentioned Carnival, and maybe that's one of them, but like when you first started going to LA or when you first moved to LA, was there anything that you were like, okay, this is not Utah anymore, or I'm not in not even Utah, but like I'm not in my hometown anymore?
Oh yeah. Well, first and foremost, the community in Utah is just so different from any other community out there. Just how tight and close everyone is, and the support network that everyone has, it's so different. And it's not very like social media driven. No one is, or I can't say no one, but I would say most people that are like in the dance scene in Utah, that are consecutively in the dance scene, are working to be big. Or they're not, like, that's not their main focus.
Especially in that like freestyle realm.
Yes, absolutely. Whereas Los Angeles, I felt like everyone showed up for the video. And so that was one of the big things, especially because this was, when I first moved, it was 2019, toward or end of 2018 a little bit as well, when I very first started getting out there. And these are when class videos started.
Class footage was
blowing
crazy.
up.
Yep.
And this is when T Millie videos were going crazy, and IAF videos were randomly blowing up, popping up out of nowhere.
Yep.
And so I felt like if you had to I felt like choreographers, when they were teaching, had to specify whether they were doing videos or not. And I would go regardless if they were videoing or not, just for training, because ML was my personal place that I always went to for training. And I felt like the studios or the teachers that weren't videoing got half as many students, to maybe even a quarter as many students as the classes that were filming
the footage.
And so I felt like everything was just for the gram. Everything was to just go to pop off or to show off and everything. Nothing was for actual training or anything of that sort. And I feel like in that sort of sense, because everyone's going for the video, there's this underlining sense of competition in the room. Because, they don't video everyone. So you walk into the room and everyone is just sitting there, I'm going to get videoed. I want to get a solo. I'm going to get in this group. I want to dance with this person because, Jade might be in the room, or this other person might be in the room. And I need to show and prove to myself and to everyone else in this room that I can be a soloist. But it's like, it creates a little bit of a toxic environment, because you can tell as soon as you walk into the classroom, like, people are just there just for the video or
Yeah.
just for themselves, you know? So that was off-putting compared to going to Millennium in Utah or even a convention in Utah where I would know so many people and it was just family right off the bat.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think for a while I was searching for a family sort of environment, community driven sort of thing.
Yep.
And unfortunately, well, it wasn't unfortunate at the time, but I'm a Beast was the place that I fell in love with.
Yeah. Yeah.
High society and all those things, just because it brought a huge group of people together and we all rehearsed together all the time.
Yep.
And it felt like a family a little bit. But now, I mean, I don't know where Wildebeest is, but I mean, that whole thing just blew up. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
that was the biggest thing.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And like I want to make one quick small point and get your feedback on it, but then I want to move into that topic that you just brought up of I'm a Beast. But I feel like too, there's this weird thing now, and I have definitely felt it myself, where like when you choreograph and you know that you're probably going to film that class, there's like this part of you that choreographs a specific way because you learn really quickly that lateral movement just doesn't work. It's really hard to track it on the camera. It's really hard for people to stay in formation. And so like anybody that's watching this or any dancer, like go and watch class footage and you'll realize really quickly that so much class footage stays almost in the same exact place the entire time.
Yep. It's just
because of that reason. And I feel like that in itself is such like a hindrance to like the creative process, but also to the class process because you're not really, I feel like you're not really fully getting that choreographer's like vision or heart or like creativity because they're subconsciously like, oh, I need to catch this on film.
Yep. That actually has a lot of other side effects just besides, I mean, I noticed it going into battles in Los Angeles after doing so many classes and so much choreography and everything that my freestyling was staying in the exact same spot. I would not travel at all. And I got called out on it on numerous occasions.
Yeah.
And I'm still working on fixing it, to be honest with you. But no, even when I choreograph, you know, when compared to if I'm doing a competition piece or if I'm doing a Millennium piece, or I taught in LA a couple times that I knew that I was going to video just so I could get that
for sure.
Footage for sure, just because for my own resume and everything.
Yeah.
But choreographing something that I know that is going to be on stage compared to what I know is going to be on film compared to what, like if it's just a class just for a classic, just, you know, to live and be free in the class. I dislike doing choreography for filming more than anything else. Because there's so many limitations and so many other thought processes that you have to think about. And especially if like if I make a piece that does have movement, I can't do any groups. Especially if it's the rooms at Millennium aren't the biggest. And so like if I had been at T Millie with, you know, Tim Milgram filming, he's incredible at filming that sort of stuff. But most videographers I don't trust to capture you know, the full piece.
For sure.
So
for sure.
There's a whole other element to that video style. And so, and I feel like that also can affect a crap ton of other things in the LA industry and everything, because I feel like the movement is always just back and forward. Never any all around or anything. And so I feel like my personal side effects that I had whenever I freestyle, I don't travel, actually has other side effects on many other people that don't even fully realize it yet.
100%. 100%. Okay, I want to jump back to the IMOE stuff a little bit, just because I think that personally, I think it's just important for like younger artists to realize the negative aspects of LA and just the industry in
Right.
general as it is the positives. And I know like my own dancers get upset with me because they always think I hate LA, and I really don't hate LA. But
Mhm.
I just think it's important for them to know like that there is things that they need to look out for and things that are not super cool about it.
Right.
And I remember my first job in LA, I did it for free, and basically it was like the choreographer had come to our studio, taught a master class, and then he emailed the director and was like, "Hey, if Jason wants to be in this video,
Mm.
he's more than welcome to like come out. We don't have any budget, but he could come out and be in it." And I was like, "Cool, like sure, I'll take that." And I remember I
Right.
stayed at his house. He offered for me to stay at his house, and
Mm.
I was maybe 17 or 18 at the time, and I didn't really think anything of it. And but another choreographer that was just happened to be in town around the same time frame, he told my director, he was like, just make sure, like, just tell him to just be careful and just be aware, because like, things happen, like people will do things or take advantage of dancers
Yep.
in situations like that. And nothing happened. Like it was an amazing
Okay,
experience. Like
good.
the choreographer was fantastic.
Awesome.
I'm not gonna say his name because I don't want like there to even be
Right.
like any sort of like indication that anything happened, because it was fantastic. He was great. He had this really dope house like in the hills. It was wild. But
Mm.
so great experience. But that was one of my first openings to like, oh, there's really weird stuff that happens in the dance industry. And I've always compared it to, the more that I've learned about it, to it really is like the dance industry mirrors Hollywood in so many aspects,
Yep.
um, even the negative ones. But the scarier thing about, I feel like, the dance industry is because it sits in this like medium to large space where like it's a massive industry for those who know about it, but it's a small enough industry to where it's not mainstream,
Totally.
that it I feel like even more flies under the radar in the dance industry because of that reason.
Totally.
So my question is so like, let's taking the I'm a Beast thing for example, and we don't have to dive into like what exactly happened, because I don't know if anybody knows everything, but was there indication or any indication like prior to Will getting busted or outed or whatever, that things like that were happening within I'm a Beast? And what was sort of like the reaction, if there was?
Um, there were definitely some signs beforehand. Um, Probably one of the biggest ones that I personally saw was his relationship with some of the minor women.
Mm,
Um, Usually, you can tell when something is a little bit iffy or a little bit sketchy. I'm not gonna pull up any specifics
for
because I don't
sure.
want to release anyone else's story or anything. But there just are definitely some interactions and moments that you can definitely just catch on the side, and then even just like seeing some of the girls' reaction to him.
Yeah.
Like you can definitely feel that uncomfortable energy beforehand. You can definitely see the awkwardness between the two, and there's definitely also tension in the room.
Mm,
Um, Even with his now ex-wife, um, some of the things that have happened in their history was also a giant red flag.
yeah.
And the way that he handled their relationship, um, I mean, it's all public. It was all on social media. And so, honestly, I'm slightly frustrated at myself for not fully doing my own homework
Mm,
on who I was working for and who I was supporting and who I was also helping grow.
right.
Because had I done just a
Mm,
little bit of homework, it wouldn't have taken very much, to be honest with you. Had I done just 30 minutes of serious looking into, that history of things, I wouldn't have been comfortable being on I'm a Beast
mm,
and, going further into high society and all that other stuff and promoting his product.
mm,
Um, so I think that I mean, there were some very, very major signs that I'm disappointed that I did not really think too much about at the time. It was just more so I was excited for I'm a Beast, High Society, and the opportunities that came with it and everything,
100%.
and all the people, all the dancers that were on High Society. I just got so caught up in it that I just did not even really think twice.
Well, and I think what people fail to understand sometimes too is, and it's so hard, um, because like it's so easy for the pendulum to swing completely to one side or completely to the other side when it comes to like topics of abuse in any industry or any sort of like
Right.
subculture of the world. But I think what sometimes gets missed is it's really hard as a dancer when you, because the like the term that gets thrown around is like the grooming aspect of things. And I think what sometimes gets misunderstood is that like there's so many more parties involved in grooming in a lot of these situations than just the like inherent or obvious victim.
Yep.
And that's what's really hard is like when you're so close to a situation, it's just like anything. When you're inside of something, it's really hard to step back and see what's actually happening, especially if
Yep.
you're a part of the if you're unlike aware that you have sort of been groomed in a sense of like um thinking that this person is something that they're not. And I think also
Hmm.
like it's such a blurred line between something that is maybe just like, oh, that's kind of creepy, or like, and like I wouldn't personally do that, but like, and something that's
Yeah.
actually like wrong and not right and should be spoken up on. And I think that that's what becomes really hard for younger artists to distinguish between, is like they don't necessarily always feel safe enough or confident enough to be like to speak out on something.
Hmm.
But at the same time, like sometimes, because I think like people in general, like some people are just more open to individuals than others. Like me, like I don't like to hug people. I really don't like. It has
Hmm.
nothing really to do with dance. It's just like I don't love touching people, especially people that I'm not super close with. And so like that's just not in. It's not built into like my character trait. But for
Hmm.
some people, they are more physical. They are more like, they want to shake your hand, or they want to give you a hug, or they want to. And I think it's really hard to like sometimes draw that line of what is right and what's wrong. And then that
Hmm.
sometimes causes things to drag on, because things that may seem like red flags, you're kind of like, oh, well, maybe it's just like, that's just the person they are, And then it's like, next thing you know, it's like, well, I was wrong. Um,
Hmm.
so I definitely like, I get that for sure. And I think that like, it's easy how you're saying to like feel like guilt almost that you didn't like see it beforehand
Yep.
or like speak up beforehand. But in the same breath, it's like, um, it's almost like everybody involved in that is groomed in a sense to think that like what's happening is
Yep.
not anything bigger than what your imagination or mind might think it is.
Hmm. I think there's also maybe I definitely had when I first heard, you know, um, Will did some incredible things for me
Hmm.
personally. Um, he definitely went the extra mile for me, which I was 100% grateful for. And so to kind of hear this stuff, it almost was like a denial factor at first. I was like, there's no
Mm,
way. I mean, because he had like came off as this like great person. He had given me so many scholarships, paid for so much stuff for
yeah.
traveling and everything. Like he seemed like such a genuine person that like would never do any of that sort of stuff. But like there was just way too much stacked against him and everything. And it was just like way too like now the puzzle's starting to come together
Mm,
and things started to finally make sense. And I was like, I felt like I definitely was played. And I'm
yeah.
sure
Yeah.
everyone that was a part of I'm a feels that way.
Yeah.
Where it's
Yeah.
just like he was putting on and portraying this perfect face so that people would deny it and that
Right.
people wouldn't believe it at
Yeah.
first.
Yeah,
But
for
then,
sure.
it just, and the sad thing is that it's definitely, you can see it in a lot of other places besides IMA.
Mm,
Like, you see it in a lot of the old faculty members that were part of the dance awards.
Yep.
Again, not going to drop names or anything, but that was, I mean, a lot of them are gone now just because they had certain things happen or whatever, but they were able to take advantage, because they had that sort of power and everything.
Yeah.
And they have that name or that industry and that history behind them. And it makes them honestly the perfect abuser, if you would.
Yeah.
For these younger kids and some of the older teenagers for sure that are just about to graduate, it makes them the perfect victim because you see these bigger names and all this other stuff. So
well, and I think too, it's like that the break the floor and like dance award situation is the perfect example of like the dance industry mirroring Hollywood in the sense that was a massive scandal. I hate the word scandal. Like that was a massive like situation of abuse on like so many different levels.
That was just swept under the rug.
Yes. They said this is what bugs me about that whole situation is like all they did was they let go a few people, they switched ownership hands, and that was it. Everyone was fine.
And
and it's like to me, like I guess too, like this is where my perspective sometimes is different than other people is because I do have like my like split life is like corporate business stuff and then like dance and artistry. And so it's like to me, that side of me in my mind, whether this is true or not, maybe it's not, is like there's no way the former owner is done. There's no way. Like like he may not be listed on the website anymore. And he may not be listed on the financials anymore when you look at their quarterly earnings or whatever the case may be. But there's no way that he just said, see ya, and is completely separated from the company. So that's the part that kind of like frustrates me is I'm like, now this monster of a company, like this is like, I think that's part of it is like, I don't think dancers quite understand how big Break the Floor is.
Yeah.
Like it is a massive, I mean, I think it shows in who they switched ownership to, because the new owner is like a massive Hollywood producer that has produced like tons of massive films. So obviously it's a big enough company for somebody who is very well integrated in a much larger industry to be like, sure, I'll have a play in this. We're talking like multiples, like hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And so for them to just be able to just make those changes and on the other side of it, it's like, what else do I want them to do? And I get that, but like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just feel like we've seen this play out before. I give it 3 years. Majority of those choreographers are doing stuff again.
I completely agree with you.
Like it's not. I just think we've seen it too many times before, and it's like that's exactly how it's going to play out.
Yeah. I don't think personally. Well, the dance awards and Break the Floor, they have their foot in the door in so many different dance products and businesses and everything, and dance wear and everything. Other dance competitions that are more locally based instead of being a national thing, they're everywhere. And so I feel like absolutely no one wanted to say something against them, because I'm sure that they're linked somehow, some way, shape, or form. But I don't feel like the consequences that the choreographers that were let go were harsh enough by any means.
Yeah, I agree.
Not even close.
I agree.
And so I feel like that lack of accountability there and that lack of responsibility is definitely going to be what leads to it happening again in just probably over a couple years. I feel like, again, the things that happened in the last just few years will be again swept under the rug. And then
Yep.
new generation enters.
Yep.
So,
And I think this is a great segue into the next topic, which is a little lighter. I should say more empowering, is like I feel like it starts with dancers knowing and understanding that they have the power and the ability to say no to things.
yep.
And I'm really not just speaking on like abuse situations. I mean all the way down to like, and we had this conversation recently, like you don't have to take free work. You don't have to take work that you're not comfortable doing.
Hmm.
And I understand the approach of like, well, I have to pay bills, but at some point as an artist and as someone, if you really want to make this a career, you have to learn, unfortunately, that difficult situation of saying no to something that you might really need. Like you might
Yeah.
really need that $150 that you're getting paid for an 8-hour rehearsal and a 16-hour performance, but you can say no to that. And the beauty of like the world and energy is that 90% of the time something better is right around the corner. You just
Yep.
haven't gotten to it yet. And so I kind of want to like hear your like, because you've been there. You know what I mean? That's the one thing that like I
Hmm.
have heard stories, I've been around it, but I have never lived in LA. Do you feel like there's enough talk, or like is that something that's talked about, like saying no to situations? Is that something that's like promoted or talked about, or is it all just kind of like take everything you can?
It's definitely take everything you can. 100% it is. And that's one of the major problems in Los Angeles right now is the no one says no to anything.
Hmm.
Or there are the few dancers that do have enough experience, that do have a long enough resume
Yep.
to say no because they know that they're not worth that. But there are those dancers that will gladly and happily step into their place without a
Hmm.
moment's hesitation to accept what they
Yep.
shouldn't. And so it's just this constant circle of a perfect example of this is DaBaby's music video,
Yep.
where they had like two rehearsal days that were 8 hours each, and then they had a shoot day that was 10 hours, and they got paid $150 for all of
Yep.
it. For a high recording artist, that goes on tour, is very, very famous and very, very
Yep.
successful. And so a bunch of dancers that were, had been in the industry for quite a few years, they said no, like obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And then also a lot of them are part of SAG-AFTRA, so they couldn't in the
Yeah.
first place
Yeah.
because it wasn't a SAG job.
Yep.
But there were so many dancers that were just in line waiting for the opportunity just to get the name on the resume.
Yeah.
And so what that does is promotes that the music industry and all these other industries can underpay dancers because
Yep.
there's always going to be those dancers that accept it.
Yep. So how do you like, and maybe this is something you're still working on, I don't know. How do you figure out your worth or what you're comfortable with?
Um, I actually was very, very lucky to get an agency at a young age.
Hmm.
And I had quite a few different conversations with them. And the biggest suggestion that they gave was to do the most free work possible as young as possible.
Hmm.
And in that 16, 17, 18-year
Yep.
range, and just gain as much experience as possible.
Yep.
Because once you get that experience, then, a job that offers the same experience but for less money, you can say, you know what, I've done this before. This is something that I can say no to. So it's
Hmm.
definitely a
Ah.
counterbalance of like pay and experience.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
there's some of those jobs where like the experience is totally worth the underpay.
For
Totally.
sure. For sure. But
But
what
then
you're saying,
there's
sorry, I'm just to
no worries.
clarify. So what you're saying is like the perspective is what oftentimes drives people to take that lower pay. And so
Exactly.
if you already have had that experience, then it's not as cool as it would be if it was the first time around.
Exactly.
Okay, keep going.
And so,
Sorry.
no worries. And so once you get that more experience underneath your belt, you actually also learn more of your worth as a dancer and your worth as a choreographer.
Mm.
Because there's been, I mean, I've been offered just a couple jobs even here in Utah
Yeah.
where, I have had to turn down because the
Hmm.
pay was too minimal for the days. And
Yeah.
it's just,
Yeah.
it would be a good experience with a couple of friends, but it's not something that I can accept and lower myself down to,
For
because
sure.
the last thing that I want is to be underpaid,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
for the work that I put in. And so it's just always a constant like gauge, and it's a very, very personal gauge too. It's open completely to the individual. If you feel that the experience is totally worth it over this minimal pay, then that's the risk you have to take and the consequences you have to take.
For sure. For sure.
But at the same time, and it's a little bit of a butting head sort of motion.
Yep.
There's got to be those times where you have to stand firm. The
Yeah.
experience might be great, but at the same time, the pay either is not there, or just some of the things that make you uncomfortable are not there, and it's just not worth it, for the experience, or vice versa.
Yeah.
Something about it might not be comfortable and the pay might be amazing. The experience is okay, but that thing that makes you uncomfortable, sometimes you just got to put your foot down.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a new show coming out in Las Vegas. I can't give any details, of course, because it's very, very on the down low.
Hmm.
That I had auditioned for, and I actually got the job. And I was super excited. I would have to relocate to Las Vegas for 18 months.
Okay.
And great pay, of course. It's not a part of Cirque, so it's not as good of Cirque, but it's still amazing pay. And I finally got the offer, and there were some very, very key factors that made me extremely uncomfortable.
Mm.
And I had to deliberate about it. I talked to my agency about it. I even called a couple friends, and I was just like, I don't know if this is worth it, because I just don't know if I could do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I ended up turning it down.
Mm.
So, and I think honestly, if I didn't have the experience that I had, if it was one of my, first 10 jobs out in Los Angeles or anything, I would have taken it without a second thought and just said, you know what? It's totally fine. I can live through this uncomfortability and all this other stuff.
Right.
I'll be fine. So, but thankfully I did as much free work as I did and all those other things, to the point where I was like, you know what? I for myself and everything, I can't do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, my biggest piece of advice to any younger dancer is just mainly get as much free experience as possible, as young as possible, and everything. But also try to reach out to as many people that also have the experience, that have an agency, that have done the work out in Los Angeles, or even work here in Utah, and ask for their expertise.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time we tend to blindly run into something just because it's a paid dance job. So we're getting paid to dance. So that kind of gives you a high. So yeah.
And I think that was all such like fantastic advice, because I think that there's a certain element, like you have to take free work, you have to do those things, and there really is nothing wrong with that at all. But there's a point too where you have to balance between like you said, am I doing this because of the experience or because of the opportunity that I think is there, or do I actually need this job? Do I actually need this thing? Because the problem is and this is in any industry, is once you have been in something long enough, you realize that every single opportunity is going to get you followers. Every opportunity is going to be seen by millions of people. Every opportunity is going to lead to a bunch of jobs after that. Like, these are just those catchphrases that people use to rope you into doing things that you probably shouldn't be doing.
Yep.
Because and it's a big reason why in my marketing videography side of things, I really shy away from working with influencers, because I've had interactions in the past with influencers and they never ever want to pay for anything. And it's always because you'll get tons of jobs after this, or you'll get tons of people reaching out. And I think like if I could
Yep.
give one confident statement, no one's reaching out. No one will reach out
Yep.
to you afterwards. Nobody
No.
cares. And
Mm-mm.
so it's like, but they use that type of verbiage and that energy to get you into positions that you are really excited about, because it is exciting. Like when someone's talking to
Mm-hmm.
you like that and they're like name dropping and they're giving you all these things, like it's exciting. But,
Yeah.
and I want like your opinion on this. For me, saying no to something that actually maybe seems like a good opportunity, but it's just, you're just not comfortable with it, is like weirdly fulfilling. Like
Oh yeah.
after I say no to something that like I probably would have said yes to like a year or 2 years ago, I like always like leave the situation like, and I feel like I'm kind of like boosted up a little bit.
Yeah. Well, there's a thing floating around right now, actually, just with current trends and everything, that people are saying it's better to reject a 10 than it is to land a 10, like a person
Mm,
that's, you know.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So that goes kind of hand in hand with this perfectly. Is
yep,
like they want you, but you're basically just saying like, nah, like you can't have
yeah,
me, basically.
yeah,
But it's also reaffirming your own personal standards as an artist,
100%.
because you have those standards, you have that like base of like, okay, these needs need to be met
Hmm.
for me to accept this job. And if it's less than that, and they're like, they want you, of course, then it makes you feel good about yourself, and it actually promotes more confidence for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
So to just blindly continue to say yes and everything actually does show a little bit of uh less confidence
yeah,
than
yeah.
confidence.
We've mentioned this. We're like getting. I don't want to keep you too long, so we're getting towards the end. But we've talked about like agencies a lot, so I want to like give the straightforward question of like, because I've had a lot of students ask me this. I have a lot of people ask me this on like socials and stuff. Is like, is a dance agency worth it? And what are some of the things that you feel like were beneficial, but maybe also some drawbacks from being with a dance agency?
um I did have a little bit of a unique experience with my dance agency. I entered into an open call. I found out the
Mm,
night before and ended up driving out to Los Angeles to go to this open call. And then I was lucky enough to get accepted. Um, but I do highly recommend an agency. Um, I would, the biggest part that I recommend holding off on is joining the union for waiting for as long as possible.
mm,
Um, but just dance agency wise, the biggest pluses for me was, one, they definitely promoted me to their choreographers that were involved in their agency and everything. So I
right.
mean, that's one of the reasons Teddy Forrence, I actually got fairly close with him, just because
Mm,
he was a part of Block and everything, and I was promoted to him just because we had similar work, and so I was able to work with him every here and there, and whenever he was in Los Angeles, but he was all over the place, of course.
yeah.
Um, so I always highly recommend an agency. Getting with one is always very interesting. I recommend always, of course, going to the open auditions. They have them on a yearly basis. Every
Yep.
dance agency in Los Angeles does, getting in front of them just so they can see your face, and they'll recognize you on a year-to-year basis.
Yep.
Um, uh, my other thing is, make sure to make friends with people that are a part of the agency you want to be. So
Mm,
that involves doing research into whatever particular agency. I did this for an ex-girlfriend of mine, where she wanted to join an agency that I was with. I was with Block, or am with Block. And so I had her put together a portfolio of a bunch of different videos, her whole resume, and then I was like, reach out to every single person that you know that is with Block that can
yeah.
also refer you, recommend you, and you can put all of our names on a list, and they can reach out to us if they want and everything, and we can vouch for you. And
Right.
she ended up joining Block the next week. So that's
Right. Right.
definitely the next big thing. And then the
Yeah.
the third one is crash auditions. Um, every single audition that doesn't say like no crashers, or like your name has to be on a list, I would crash it Go to the audition and you can get those jobs, and the agency people will recognize you from those jobs.
Interesting.
The relationship between you and your agent needs to be very, very close. Your agents look at your face basically on a daily basis because they're submitting you your jobs and everything. So you are very, very involved in their lives. So it's very important to make sure you reciprocate that energy.
Right.
So at least twice a month, I would go in, say hi to my agents and everything, bring them donuts just for fun, just making sure that I had a very, very solid relationship, and that we actually had a friendship as well as a business relationship.
Right. Well, and I think to that point, what people don't sometimes get confused by is like, you're not the only 6 foot, whatever, brown hair male that they have on their roster.
Yep.
So, but you want to when they get that call, you want your face and your picture to be the first one that they think of, not whoever else.
Yep. And so, maintaining that relationship definitely helps with that. Some drawbacks of having an agency, you're probably going to have to do work that you aren't the biggest fan of at first, of course, because they are going to recommend their most successful, their most experienced dancers first, because of course they also need to represent themselves as a very high quality agency. So you kind of have to build up your own name a little bit. And so that involves doing some of the work that you may not want to do. There's of course the agency fee. They usually take around 10% if the company isn't willing to just pay the extra 10% towards the agency. They're just going to take it straight out of your paycheck. And probably the last smaller drawback is you're going to have to be very, very open, because our schedule wise, you're going to have to keep your schedule extremely open. I could not do plans long term. People would reach out to me being like, hey, in 2 months, we're doing this for a week. Could you come? And I'd be like, unfortunately, I can't let you know right now just because I'm on call and I need to be ready at a moment's notice. And usually audition calls are within 24 hours. As crazy as that is, they're usually within 24 hours. And so you need your job, if you're not making a full living off of dance, which I wasn't when I first moved to Los Angeles, I was working in a coffee shop. It has to be extremely flexible as well. So it kind of affects your other, your work life outside of dance as well. Because at a moment's notice, you need to be able to text someone and say, hey, can you cover my shift?
Right.
So
that totally makes sense. With the union stuff, is the reason that you recommend waiting? I've heard, I don't know if this is true, I've heard that one of the reasons why you should wait to join the union is because jobs only allot for a certain amount of union artists on the roster. So if you are a part of the union, yes, that makes your audition pool smaller, but it also makes it more competitive because you're only competing for, say, 2 to 3 spots out of a group of 10.
Yep. So out of all the jobs, all the gigs and auditions that happen in Los Angeles, I would say probably around 80% of them are non-union jobs. They're just smaller local people,
And in their eyes, they see you as a union dancer and they're like, oh, we have to pay you more.
Exactly. So, and also for some of the jobs, you can't audition at all if you are union. If you're going for a commercial and it says non-union, as a union dancer, you can't audition for that, or else if you did and you get the job and the union sees it, they can actually sue you for that. So, and that's the last thing that you want.
Right.
So it's just very, very difficult, especially when you first move out there and you're still networking and everything like that. If you join the union right away, you're just cutting yourself off to so many jobs, and you don't have the network ability or the network capacity to fully support yourself just yet. So, and plus just, going back to doing as much work as possible, like as much free or as cheap work as possible, as young as possible. You're only able to do that really as a non-union dancer.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then, of course, union gigs that you get, union auditions that you get are much more infrequent. They don't come as regularly.
Yeah.
Although the pay, of course, is a lot more of that compared to what you'd get as a non-union dancer.
Right.
You're only, I think, allowed to do 3 union jobs as a non-union dancer before you're required to join the union to do union gigs. I did a TV show, and then did some other work, and then they were going to bring me back on the TV show.
Yeah.
But I couldn't do those episodes unless I joined the union, and they
Gotcha.
would not let me even audition for it.
So because you didn't have those credits or whatever.
Yep. So I was forced to join the union, which is a lot of money to join.
Yep. Yeah.
It is a lot of money to join.
Yeah.
And there's annual fees as well, and has its own political system of voting and all that other stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Deal with and everything. So it's best to stay out of the union for as long as possible. Build that experience, those relationships, that network first.
Yeah.
And then once you get into the union side of things and you have that network, then you can still make a consistent living.
Yeah. Well, I think too, there's like this perception that's the dancers union and even the actors is different than like other unions. Because I think most people are familiar with unions. I mean, you learn about unions in school, but I think that people don't understand that like it's the same thing. I mean, it's a group of individuals that are set out to protect the rights and the personal interests of dancers, and so there's just inherently negatives that come along with that. It's just like how there's some teachers that don't like the teachers union. Like it's so I think like for dancers also understanding that like it's not this like glorified magical thing it's a union. It's just like any other union.
There's a lot of drawbacks to it.
Amazing. Okay, so last thing, we'll leave it at this, is like, where are you at right now? What are kind of your next steps, and what are what would you recommend to dancers that are kind of coming up and they're not really sure what to do or where to go?
For me personally, teaching is my biggest fulfillment right now. I teach at a couple different studios, and they're the highlight of my week. Every single week, I look forward to mentoring and just giving them private. They're incredible dancers, and I am so lucky and blessed that I get to experience, their process and their journey of growing up and everything. And I'm really, really looking forward to probably working with quite a few of them in the coming years once they graduate from their studios, because they're that good.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping to just maintain teaching for just maybe a year or so. I probably will end up going back out to Los Angeles at some point, just because I'm still super young and I don't feel like my dance career is over just yet.
Yeah.
And there's some goals that I did not fulfill that I personally will not view myself as a successful dancer or have a successful career unless I fulfill these goals.
Yeah.
So that's a must. But I don't know, mostly for me, just playing it by ear until then. My biggest piece of advice for dancers right now that are just like trying to step into like, the first professional career and everything like that.
Yeah.
I think first and foremost, this is from my personal experience, is finding some sort of mentor. Finding some sort of person that has walked in the shoes that you want, or walked the path that you want to walk,
right?
Or has had a similar journey of those sorts, and assist them as much as possible, be in their class as much as possible, have that any sort of conversation with them,
Yeah.
The second, I would take as much class as possible, as much drop-in class as possible. I of course recommend going to Millennium just because of their networking and the people that they are in touch with. If you want to move out to Los Angeles and everything, Millennium is the perfect place to get involved with, because they they have the Millennium Experience where they go out into Los Angeles, and even they're doing a World of Dance competition, not the TV show, but the actual competition.
Yep.
And they're going out to Los Angeles in next month actually to compete. And so that's a great opportunity to meet so many incredible people.
Yeah.
And then their master classes, of course. If you can get super involved in the Millennium there and become very close with the choreographers and the teachers that are regularly there. The people that they do bring in from Los Angeles, they used to do it a lot with Alexander Chung. He hasn't been back in a while, and also CJ Salvador at the time.
Yeah.
But the people that were super close at Millennium, they were invited, if they were really good friends with the owner and everything, they would have like hangouts with these choreographers and develop a very, very personal relationship with these working choreographers.
Yeah.
So I highly, highly recommend going into Millennium and getting into that world of things. My last thing is going to every single audition possible. Odyssey is just holding their auditions. I'm pretty sure they're having their callbacks before long. There's a company here in West Jordan called Atlas that has their company auditions. There's, I think, one other one that's down in Lehigh that has company auditions before long. There's a couple in up in the Ogden area that are having theirs within the month.
Yep.
I would just do research on companies that are within an hour range and just auditioning like crazy and getting that audition experience, because auditioning is its own skill set.
Yep.
There's own unique skills that come with auditioning for companies. And that's very, very important to have when you go out to Los Angeles or when you audition for your dream company, wherever it is. And you don't even necessarily need to join the company. Like if you make it, that's great. But if you don't want to do it, then you can tell them no.
Yeah.
But just even getting the experience in there is incredible. I think that's everything that I have. Those are like the three biggest ones that I have to offer. Finding some sort of mentor teacher, getting involved in dropping classes and all sorts of choreographers at Millennium or anywhere that you want to outreach. If you want to reach out to Arizona, like the companies are out in Arizona and everything, because they have some incredible companies, I recommend getting involved in the UVU dance scene because they bring out choreographers from Arizona quite frequently, and Colorado as well. So just doing research on that, and then of course, very last, doing every single audition that you possibly can.
Yeah, I love that. Amazing. So, well, Sage, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, man. This was a super solid conversation.
Thank you for having me, man.
And I think that there's so many dancers that could benefit from just hearing your story and just what you have to offer. And any Utah dancers that are out there, Sage is here right now. So I know that he does private lessons and things like that. So if you are interested or you have anything, any aspirations to do things past studios, like he said, it's never a bad idea to reach out to people who have done that before and, see what they can offer you or help you with to kind of give you a leg up or get you to that next point. So thank you again. And I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, definitely. And I always respond on Instagram for anyone that just has any questions or anything, just wants to reach out randomly. I always respond on Instagram. So
amazing.
You can look me up. So thank you so much for having me, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty, man. Have a good day.
You as well.
Okay, peace.